All right, joining me now on Newsfighters, live from Berlin, it's Joel Dullroy from Deutsche Welle and the great Berlin news podcast in English, Radio Spätkauf. Joel, how are you going this morning?
I'm a little tired. It's about 4 a.m. here, but I'm surviving on caffeine.
And turning to the federal, I guess you call it the federal German election, in terms of the winners and losers from the results, it doesn't really appear as though anyone's really cleaned up there.
Germany's centre-left Social Democrats have edged into the lead in the national election there.
Germany's general election has resulted in a virtual gridlock.
But it could be weeks or even months until a new chancellor is declared.
Yeah, it kind of feels like everybody lost just a little bit. No one's really come out as a winner here. It's a bit of a compromise all round. So they're going to have to spend a long time trying to pull together a coalition, probably with the SPD, the Greens, maybe another small party. But you can never count out the idea that the CDU could still be in there again. But yeah, it's going to take a while. The last time they did this, it took like 5 months before Germany had a coalition. So, we haven't seen the end of Angela Merkel just yet. She's going to be around for a bit longer.
Yeah, she'll be in caretaker mode. Yes, so her party, the Christian Democrats, their votes down quite a bit. The Social Democrats, who are more the left-wing party under Olaf Scholz, are up quite a bit, and it's looking like he could be the next chancellor. Yeah, is that more than likely?
That's how it's looking at the moment, but he's got to convince the other parties to come along with him, and they're all going to want a policy here or there, so it's going to take a while. Although, I've lived in Germany now for 13 years, and I really like this idea of coalition government where they, actually have to try and compromise on things, like adults, not just, try and get everything they want or walk out of the room.
Yeah, it's not that winner takes all thing. And two of the parties it's looking like they're going to have to talk to are the Greens, whose vote is up quite a lot. But then there's this kind of liberal economic free market party, the Free Democrats. And I understand the Greens and the Free Democrats are talking together already. What are they going to agree on? It sounds like one wants more green energy, one wants more taxes. How are they, any idea what this could mean policy-wise?
It's a complete mystery, and that's what everyone's scratching their heads about at the moment. The Greens, they want to be able to regulate their way out of the climate crisis, and the FDP want to leave it up to the market and don't want any new taxes. So it's really hard to see how they're going to come together, but if they want to form a government, they're going to have to try and compromise at some point. But yeah, look, the German politics, it's always a compromise situation, and nobody ever really gets everything that they want.
If it is looking like the more left-wing parties will form the coalition with the Social Democrats and the Greens, any idea what that'll mean policy-wise? Will there be any big changes in policy direction for Germany?
Well, we have to expect that there's going to be more action on climate change because there hasn't been enough. But I mean, Germany's got other big issues here. I don't know if you've heard, but if you take a train anywhere in the middle of the country, it's really hard to get Wi-Fi, even on like the best trains going through areas that you'd think it would be possible to get a wireless connection. Your phone just drops out. The digital infrastructure here is just decades behind, and they haven't kept up. And so that really needs to be addressed if Germany's going to keep up with the rest of the world. We also got this huge reliance here on the car industry. It props up so many jobs, and politicians are just loath to touch it because they don't want to annoy the unions, they don't want to annoy the workers, they don't want to take away jobs. But those jobs are going to disappear anyway once the electric car revolution gets going, and Germany hasn't done enough to make sure that its car companies are electrified as well. So a lot of catching up there to do as well.
And any ideas in terms of foreign policy? Like Australia, Germany relies a lot on trade with China. So I guess that means no party will want to kind of try and isolate China the way it seems like Australia and America and the UK are ganging up on them right now, yeah?
Yeah, Germany tries to get along pretty well with China, to say. I think it's the biggest export partner now. And they sell a lot of cars there, and they don't really want to piss them off that much. So Germany is not as bellicose against China as other countries are.
And in terms of the campaign itself, I guess if everyone's potentially looking at forming partnerships with everyone must be a very polite election campaign. No insults at the debates or anything, I assume.
Well, not direct personal insults. And frankly, the main candidate for the Conservatives, Armin Laschet, he did enough by himself without anyone having to insult him to not come across looking like a bit of a fool. He made gas all over the place.
He was famously laughing at the flood event, which was a lot of people were angry about.
Laschet was once the front-runner to succeed Angela Merkel as Chancellor. But after he was caught laughing while the president was speaking in a flood-hit village, his polling took a hit.
Yep, and then he did an interview with some children on children's television, and these little kids, they basically tore into him. Very well researched. Everyone suspects that they had earpieces in when they were asking him the questions, but he couldn't even answer a simple question like, "What would you call your pet dragon?" This is a guy who really sort of fudged his way and bungled the election. So no one really needed to insult him. He did a pretty good job of that himself.
And what can we expect from Olaf Scholz? I think it'll be very weird for the world to have a guy named Olaf at the G7, but what can we expect from him personally if he does become Chancellor?
Well, he's pretty boring. That's pretty much why he won.
He was the finance minister, right? Yeah.
He was the finance minister, and he was also a state leader from Hamburg before that. But he does have actually a few interesting potential skeletons in his closet. As a finance minister, there were a few scandals going on here in Germany relating to banking, some really big banking companies that were proven to be completely fraudulent. And there's some suggestion that he might have known a little bit in advance or known more about what was going on than he's let on so far. So, he does seem boring, but, there could be a little bit of interest if he does get in power and people start digging a little bit more into his personal phone and email records to see what he knew when about these scandals.
Is it a bit like if Peter Costello or Wayne Swan somehow became Prime Minister?
That's a pretty good equivalent, yeah. But,
yeah, right.
In this case, one of the reasons that he's done so well is because, well, Angela Merkel herself was pretty boring, and it seems like Germans just like a kind of middle of the road, sensible person who doesn't look too flashy and just gets the job done.
And speaking of Angela Merkel, she's been Chancellor since we had John Howard as Prime Minister. And I don't know, in the West, all the media coverage has been that Germany's going to miss her and the world's going to miss her. How true is that? Are young people going to miss her? People just find her kind of boring and ubiquitous at this stage? Or will people actually miss her as Chancellor?
Older people are going to miss her as Chancellor. And you can see that because the CDU lost tons of votes and they all went to the SPD. And the suspicion there is that that's the Merkel vote. Those people were traditional SPD voters before, but they liked her because she was middle of the road, and she basically stole a lot of the SPD's policies and included them in her own. And so she brought those people along, and now she's gone, and they've gone elsewhere. But young people they're quite angry at Merkel and politics in general for just not doing enough about climate change and just letting their futures be stolen. So there's going to be a lot of young people who, not in a hateful way, but they're happy that Merkel is the era of Merkel is over, and that something new can begin where these policies, these problems can actually start being taken seriously.
And speaking of young people voting on interesting things, there was this, it's got a bit of coverage over here. So Berlin voted yes on property expropriation to reclaim housing from giant real estate companies. Could this actually happen, or is this just, what's the vote about? Well,
I live in Berlin and I cover mostly local Berlin politics. And this is really one of the most exciting ideas that we've had in ages. So the referendum basically called for the city government to forcibly purchase hundreds of thousands of apartments from private landlords, but only those big private companies that own more than 3,000 apartments. So it was really specifically targeting these huge companies that just own swathes of property.
Right. That are for profit, I assume.
Yeah, definitely
big
for profit
companies, yep.
So you got to keep in mind, Berlin is a city of renters. There's a huge number of people rent here. We're up to 85% of the city are renters rather than owner-occupiers. And so everybody here is interested and worried about rent prices going up. And these big companies have huge influence, and they have been putting the rents up for ages. And everyone's been getting angry about it. The city's tried to do various things by capping the rents over the last few years. It hasn't really worked. And then there's been these big protests which culminated in this referendum. At first, nobody thought it would get anywhere because it's just too radical. I mean, the idea, it's like, we're 30 years here after the end of socialism in East Germany. And we've got the citizens of the city who basically now, the overwhelming majority have told the city government, we want you to forcibly purchase property back from the market and put it in state hands, And what happens now? Well, it's actually not a binding referendum, so the politicians can ignore it if they want to. But it's pretty hard to ignore a referendum where more than 56% of the people said they want this to happen. 1 million Berliners voted in favor of this. So they're going to have to find some way to fudge around it if they don't want to actually do it. Because if they did do it, there's one estimate that it would cost something like 36 billion euros to actually pay out these companies to get their properties back. Even though the supporters of the initiative say that the state has the permission to do it for much cheaper, using the constitution, they could actually pay out a lot less if it's in the public interest. But the problem actually is that the main party that has won the city-state election, which is also the SPD, they're against it, and their mayor doesn't want to do it. And it's making the process of forming a coalition to govern here on a local level also very difficult. It's putting the Greens and the Left Party against the SPD, and so the image that Berlin has had recently of this sort of lefty-greeny city that's has a really progressive politics, that could actually change a bit after this latest election, and because of this particular referendum, which might split these parties apart because they all have such different take on whether we should actually go ahead and do this.
So the idea will be that it'll be like compulsory acquisition here when they buy land for a train station or something. But then it'll be owned by the state. So the Berliners actually like their housing run by the state.
Yeah, well, public housing here is not a negative thing. It's not like a housing commission run down flats. It's good quality housing, and it's affordable, and it stays affordable. You don't have to worry about getting kicked out of your flat without notice, which can happen when you've got a private landlord. You don't have to worry about insane rent increases. Your rent might go up a little bit, but it's just a safe, affordable way to live, and it's got a very different image here than in other countries, that's for sure. Here, if you get into a city-owned housing apartment, you consider yourself lucky.
Wow. Well, I think I know why so many Aussies are moving to Berlin then, if there's affordable housing.
If they can find somewhere to live, it's very hard to actually get a flat. And that's the other problem. They certainly need to build more apartments.
And just finally, to COVID, before we go, we're about to open up here in a few weeks. What are the lessons from Germany? Here they're saying that from December 1st in New South Wales, unvaccinated people will be allowed anywhere and everywhere. But I understand you guys are leaning the other way. Is that correct?
Oh, no, we're opening up here too. We have been for a while now. Our vaccination rates are doing pretty well. And we can start going to nightclubs. Next week, the famous Berghain nightclub reopens business as usual. You can go in if you're vaccinated and can dance without a mask. So
are there different tiers for if you're vaccinated or not vaccinated? Like unvaccinated people have to stay outside or something, or... Is it
exactly. It's getting harder and harder to do anything if you're not vaccinated anymore. It's almost impossible to be able to sit inside a restaurant, to go inside a nightclub, to go to a cinema. You have to stay outside and wave your protest banners out saying whatever it is you think your freedoms have been removed because you're not vaccinated. But look, it's working here. The hospital rates are down, the infection rates are down, and people are getting on with their lives, and we're all quite happy about it, to be honest.
Terrific. Well, all the best, and Olaf says we should have the final Chancellor results by Christmas, which fingers crossed, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's great talking to you, and we'll see. We may have by Christmas. Last time it took longer than that, but
wow,
if you like the side of Angela Merkel, you can be happy she's around for a few more weeks at least.
Well, certainly a lot better than in Australia, where it's just whoever Rupert Murdoch decides. That's for sure. Where can people find you and Radio Spätkauf?
Well, Radio Spätkauf, we are Berlin's English news podcast. We do a show about once a month. If you've ever visited Berlin and you want to know what's going on here, we keep you updated about trams and U-Bahns and bicycles and parks and parties and all the fun stuff, and the politics as well. So just search for us on your podcast feed. Now, Spätkauf is spelled S-P-A-E-T. So it's got a funny umlaut. A Spätkauf is like a kiosk. It's a bottle shop. the corner store. You go, the place you go to get your beer,
get your Spady beers,
gum, whatever else.
Yeah.
And it's a place everyone has to go. Everyone has to go at least once a day, and so it's a very local place, and that's why we named the show Radio Spätkauf. We like the idea that we might be something playing in the background of your local Spätkauf.
Terrific. All right, thanks again for being on the show, Joel Dullroy. Thank you.
Thanks.